In this Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020 video, I'm going to show you how to use the automatic takeoff modes in the H160 by High Performance Group. I'm Tactical Pascale, and I've been given early access to the fantastic H160 by High Performance Group so that I can bring together a set of tutorials on how to use this wonderful addition to your sim hangar. So, let's get cracking. So here we're in the cockpit of the H160. Now I'm sitting on a helipad right now, outside the Royal Infirmary in Edinburgh. Now the reason I'm on a helipad is because we can show off the excellent rearward takeoff automatic function that we have in the H160. Let me just clear that message down. Now what I'm going to do is I'll run through how we set the aircraft up ready for the departure, and then how it does it. It's quite simple, to be honest. So first things first, check that our parking brake is on. If it's not, make sure your parking brake is set to on. Then we're going to look to the overhead panel up above. Now the button you can see in between the engine, flight and idle buttons is the NR high. We're going to click that until that little green on message comes. We're then going to come to the front. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the time here at the top of the iPads and then go down to the autopilot. Now all of this, all these autopilot upper modes, they can be mapped to your HOTAS. Now, let me just zoom in on a sec. Everything here is done, or everything the iPad is done on the HOTAS. So if you have enough buttons and switches, you can map everything here. So the reason that High Performance Group have put this on the iPad is so we have easy access to it instead of having to map a million buttons, because not everyone has joysticks that have all these buttons. There are certainly some out there that do, but not every joystick has the buttons that can use the autopilot modes. So while some may look at it as if it's cheating, it's not. It's just an easier way that people can actually access it, and it makes it more accessible for all. So these buttons, they can all be mapped, and when I go into the auto hover in a minute, I'm going to use a mapping on my keyboard rather than pressing the button. So that hopefully clears that up. So let's get back to our takeoff. So we've got our parking brake to on, NR to high. Then what we're going to do is look at our FND. Now we're going to select takeoff, and we're going to leave it as the rearward selection. Now we've got our takeoff decision point of 130 or 130. I'm just going to put that up to 200. That's going to give me more time so that if during the takeoff I need to reject the takeoff, or if I need to do something, I've got until that decision point to make up my mind if I'm going to carry on or not. Then what we need to do is press in on the dial. That will accept our takeoff decision point of 200 feet. And then we need to select our button here, change it until we get the hover sub mode. So hov, and you'll see the H for the helipad there. Now all we need to do for the rearward takeoff is we're going to bring it into a light hover, a few feet off the ground, and then engage the auto hover system. So I'm going to bring in the power, gently come up, and engage the auto hover. Now, while the helicopter stabilises, let me go to the external view. The reason we're going to do this rearward takeoff is at a helipad because we know that the way in is safe, so we can go back out the way we came. You can also use all these assisted takeoff modes if you're at an accident scenes, things like that, so it gives you more stability for the pilot, and it gives you more assistance when you're actually getting the aircraft off the ground. So, now that we're in the automatic hover, all we need to do to engage the autopilot mode is press this go around button. Again, that can all be mapped on a HOTAS if you have it, but for ease of use, High Performance Group have put it here on this iPad. All these buttons can be mapped. If you want, you don't even need that iPad on. You can fly if you've got enough buttons to map. So, when I press this go around button, the helicopter will start its automatic rearward takeoff. The aircraft AFCS takes control of all the systems and brings us backwards. Now if I go external, you can see we're going back in the way we came. Nice and easy. We know that was a safe way because that's the way we came in and landed at the Royal Infirmary on that helipad. And backwards, away we go. Nice and simple. Now we're monitoring the engine systems here to make sure anything goes wrong. If something does go wrong, and I'll demonstrate that in a little bit, the H160 has a unique ability to take the aircraft back to the pad, so it's called a rejected takeoff. And if that happens, this, where it says rearward takeoff, that will become rejected, and then it will take itself back to the pad. So we're going to call it I'm happy there, we're high enough. I'm going to then disengage this rearward takeoff, so I'm going to press the go around button, which is going to engage a 15-second flyaway mode. So the aircraft, again, I'm not touching the controls, the aircraft is flying itself just now. So it's engaging its flyaway mode, it'll fly in this for 15 seconds, and then we'll have our vertical speed, our heading and indicated airspeed on the autopilot modes. I'm going to change my HSI now to, there we go. So I can see the HSI, so it's still in the go around mode for 15 seconds. We're coming up to our VY speed of 65 knots, so we can bring up the gear. If we look up, the NR high has already disappeared, so that's fine. And now we can just control the helicopter as normal on the autopilot submenu, or you can disengage the autopilot and fly whichever way you want. Now to change all the headings, that is done by the autopilot system if you have it selected, the vertical speed and the indicated. But again, if you did want to use the dials, they're over here. Again, you can have that all bound. So that was the rearward takeoff. Next up, we'll just do the vertical takeoff, and then I'll show you what happens with a rearward takeoff when you have an engine problem. So we're back in the cockpit of the 160 for the vertical takeoff. Now the process is the same. Step 1, parking brake on. There we go. Step 2, look up and select the NR high button. Then we're going to look in at the FND. Now let's select our hover submenu. So select it until it switches around to this display here. You'll see the H appear when I select the takeoff mode. Now I'm going to select a vertical takeoff for this one, so I'm going to press that button twice for vertical. My takeoff decision point, again, I'm going to roll that up. I'll put that up to about 180 feet this time, and then I'm going to press in on the button. Then I want to bring up my autopilot sub modes on the iPad. Again, like I said, if you have the buttons to bind this on the keyboard or on the HOTAS, then by all means bind them. This is just there for people who don't have enough buttons or switches on the joystick. So once that's done, we're going to bring it up into the hover again. Gently coming up into the auto hover mode. Now the aircraft will stable itself out, and it will just hold here until I give it the command. Now to give it the command to go into auto hover, again, it's the go around button that can be bound on your joystick. So I'm going to click the go around, and it'll begin its vertical takeoff without me doing anything other than monitoring the systems, making sure the engine is not overheating or cooking itself. And again, if we have a problem, the H160 has this cool party trick where it'll return you back to your landing point. But we don't have any engine problems for this one. We're just going to fly above the trees, then go off and explore sunny Edinburgh. Like the rearward takeoff mode, once you've reached that decision point or you're happy to continue your flight, you're just going to press the go around button and then fly off and continue on your merry way. The helicopter will start its little vertical climb. We're looking at the speed. When we get to about 65 knots, that's when we're going to bring up the gear and we can disengage the parking brake, ready for later when we land somewhere. So passing 30 knots now, passing 40, 45, we're still in the go away fly mode or go around fly away mode. Approaching 65 knots, so gear can come up. Again, that's just next to your parking brake. And then we'll put the parking brake to off, and if we look in the overhead panel, we see NR high is off. Now the NR high basically gives it 105% RPM for that automatic takeoff. Once we're done, bring the HSI back up, and then we can adjust our headings to go wherever we want. And again, all the trim settings, all these dials can be bound on your HOTAS, or like I said, if you don't have enough buttons, it's all here for ease of use. Again, if you don't like it, put it there, and then you can just use your keybinds as normal. Next up, we'll do the rearward takeoff with the rejected mode. So once again, we're back in the H145 at Edinburgh Royal Infirmary helipad, so we're going to make sure we've got everything set like we did the last time. So our parking brake is on. We're going to look up, select NR high. That is on. Then we're going to look at the FND. We're going to bring up our hover submenu, and then we're going to press takeoff, and we'll leave it in the rearward, so the rearward is boxed, and we can see here at the top of the page, rearward takeoff. Now I'm going to put my decision point up a little bit to give me time to prepare for an emergency. So I'll put that takeoff decision point at 200, and then push the button back in. And then I'm going to bring up my autopilot page here on the iPad, and then get ready for takeoff. So again, what we did before, we're going to bring it into the auto hover. So we're going to gently come up, hold it there, put on our auto hover. Then what we're going to do is we're going to press the go around button. Now that's going to take us away on our rearward trajectory again. So if I move my camera, we'll be able to see this. So we're beginning our little reversing out of our helipad slot. The rearward takeoff is working an absolute treat. Now we've got our decision point of 200 feet. Now this is where the party trick comes in from the H160. Should we have an engine failure, then it's going to return us back to that pad, but then when we get there we need to make sure we lower the collective so it's not going to try and take us off again. So what I'm going to do is simulate an engine problem by simply putting engine 2 and idle. Then we see rejected. The aircraft's going to take over, it's going to manage the engine within flight constraints, then take us back to where we were. And it should get us there within a few feet of where we took off. Now we can cushion it, there we go. Make sure parking brake's on. And we're back to within a few feet of where we actually took off from. So that whole thing took seconds to do. I'll cover it again in an instant replay. So I'll play this clip at 50% speed so it gives me time to talk, and then it's also time to see what's happening. So we're simulating that failure or split power on the takeoff, so we just change the engine there to idle. That lets the aircraft know that there's a problem. Now immediately it goes into the rejected mode and it starts to take us back towards the pad. It manages the engine power settings to try and maintain within engine constraints so it's not going to blow up the engine as it returns you down to the pad. As you get closer to the pad, you can use a bit of collective yourself to try and cushion, or use collective trim rather, to intervene and cushion that landing, but it's not too bad. It does it all itself and it gets you, like I said, within a few feet of where you took off. So if there is an emergency on takeoff and you're doing that rearward away from the helipad, the H160 will take you back and get you to the ground nice and safe. So once again, the autopilot mode, you're going to use this when you are doing something like medical evacuation for the vertical takeoff, or if you've got a restricted area that you've got buildings or trees in, you want to make sure that your pilot workload is decreased by the helicopters are going straight up, and it's done with the AFCS helping you out. So again, we'll set up for an automatic takeoff. We'll go vertical this time, so parking brake to on, look up, NR high to on, submenu to HOV, takeoff to vertical, decision point, I'll roll that to 160 and select that, and then we're going to bring it up into the auto hover. Going to hold her there in the auto hover mode. Now we can see that building in front of us. We don't want to get any closer, so we're going to tell the helicopter to do it itself, and then we'll click the go around button to start that vertical takeoff. And then we don't need to worry about overcompensating on the controls and clipping the rotors into a building. So if you're in a narrow spot doing a medical evacuation, then this is a system that's going to help you massively to lighten your workload, and you can concentrate on other things, getting ready for your navigation, and away you go to evacuate the casualty. So we're coming out the buildings, everything's looking clear. Nothing around us now. We're coming up towards our decision point, passing 100 feet. And then again, we're going to click the go around button. That's going to engage the flyaway mode for 15 seconds, and then we can adjust where we want to go. Now during this flyaway mode, we can adjust our headings using the autopilot knobs, etc., to change where we want to go. So decision height, we're going to continue. So I'll click the go around button. Helicopter begins its adjustments and then starts to fly away. Watching out for the UFO. Of course, it is on the Firth of Forth over there. So we're approaching our 65 knots VY speed, so we are going to bring our gear up. Now again, you can push the button or bind it. Landing gear is going to come up. Put the HSI submenu mode back on, and then inner high is already gone off. And now the helicopters is ours to control. You can bring down the upper modes of the autopilot and use that, or if you have it bound to your HOTAS like I do, you can just adjust. And then we fly off and do our mission. If you have any questions or comments, of course ask them in the comments below. I'll do my best to answer them. Of course, what would be even better is I'll include a link to the High Performance Group Discord in the video description. Head on over there and the SMEs and the developers will be more than happy to help you with any questions you have about this fantastic module. It's going to be an amazing addition to everyone's sim hangar. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, Tactical Pascale, out.